Perfect. Right. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to yet another episode of Own Thy Audience. Today we have with us Ben Ilfeld from Venture Beat now. Ben, hi Ben. How's it going?
Hi, excellent. How are you?
Good. Good. Thank you so much for asking, and thank you so much for joining us today. Really excited, for this conversation. Uh, and the reason I say so is because of your incredible background in the media industry. You've been in the media industry for what? For about for over a decade now, correct?
Yeah, I'd say it's been about, I don't remember, maybe 15 years. We started really humbly, so it's like I don't know when I formally became media, but we started really, my friends and I started discussing what we felt we wanted to change and what was interesting and what was going on like immediately after college. So even though it wasn't kind of any of our first jobs right after college, we were working on this on the side immediately. Yeah.
Interesting. And since then, you've been in and out of the publisher hat, but you've still been in the same ecosystem. You've been on the supplier side, you've been on the demand side. You've seen how those two places play along, right? And then now finally you are now at Venture Beats as the head of product.
Yeah, I'd say actually I've never been on the demand side, so I don't want to own any of it. There's people that understand that thing. Always been on the supply side. Started as a publisher. Also kind of created our own. This is way back in the day. Thinking about what like local news needed to be, what hyper local news looked like. Thinking about how there was this kind of, and you've seen it now. It's very clear now, but there was this rigid dualism that was coming out of television news at the time.
Yeah.
Kind of early 2000s, where, and honestly, like the co-founders of Sacramento Press and I felt the same way. There was this kind of dualism. You were either one way or the other, and you would accept all the beliefs of one thing, that just wasn't actually real. That was a false dualism. That was a false narrative. It doesn't represent how people think about problems. It's not how we solve problems. Really what is necessary to kind of move people isn't to join a tribe that kind of sticks you in one place, but rather to have a conversation. So we were hopeful. I mean, early days, we were thinking, there's a multiplicity of viewpoints. And if we could facilitate a healthy and civil conversation and also be covering news that nobody else is covering because they don't have the budgets to, or because they don't have the taste that they want to, that you could build something that's really special for your own community. My passion came from, I love Sacramento. I still live in Sacramento. It's my hometown. It's my favorite place. So I believe in building something durable and wonderful for the community. And then I felt like just building another news outlet wasn't going to do it. We needed a place that was much more of a forum, much more of a town hall, that was a collaboration between editorial staff who were trained and understood how journalism kind of worked, the levers, the ethics, and the monetization and sustainability pieces, and the community, building that bridge up to everybody. So that was something that was like the entire jump off, the beginning of everything. And what I found, like to put it into a little capsule, is that all of that stuff is possible, but you have to make money. Like all of that stuff works. And then also we launched in 2008. So you have these lofty ideals and you build a tech product. You also need to be able to monetize that and sustain that over time. And so we realized if you took what we were building and you broke it out, we had built an ad server, we had built a daily deal site, we had built a social media agency, we had built so many different experiments that turned into things that would kind of make money. Our own analytics system that really pointed towards meaning rather than just numbers. We didn't care about page views. We cared about the number of people who posted a comment for a second time, for example, right? All of these things had really shifted. The problem is
Yeah.
I had to import one of those things to all of my friends who were doing similar projects and
Yeah.
maybe relying on some stock tools. It had to be the ad part at the time, because that's
Yeah.
the part that made people money.
Yeah.
And I knew that with a little bit more money, they could build all the other things, and they could build it better for their communities, because everybody's community is different.
Yeah.
And so I started to think about it as a media ecosystem. It's fairly
Right.
early. And I thought, what can we do to have the biggest impact on building healthy local media ecosystems? And then later it broadened in my head to just say, what can we do to build a healthier media ecosystem? And that's really where, you know, my career has been consistently after that. It kind of went from being a publisher to taking one little core piece of what we were doing at Sacramento Press, the piece that we felt was working the best and had surprising results, called Ad Glue. It just brought advertisers into the community in a different way. So the idea back then was, instead of the advertiser just paying us money and us trafficking their ad on the page randomly, or even targeting it based on user profiles or something, we didn't really believe in that model. By the way, targeting based on user behavior and third-party data on users is kind of like, that's everything now, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was unethical. I was worried about where that would lead us as a society. I was right about what I was worried about, but I couldn't stop it happening. What we wanted to do is give an alternative route where advertisers actually supported by sort of voting up content and conversations. So if you're an advertiser, especially at the local level, this was not highly political, you could, or at least I should say it was all political, it was highly as polarized, and the lines aren't as obvious on a local level. Advertisers could go in and basically buy content out with just a button click, just like an upvote. You know, if you're on Reddit, or a thumbs up, they could see their ad in place where it would be on a piece of content and just own that content, and it would price content accordingly. And there's a lot of interesting, cool stuff we had to do around building that out. Big data to do predictive pricing, because we had to make a prediction at any moment how much traffic is likely to go to that piece of content organically from us. One of the nice things, though, is that also meant that the advertiser now becomes part of the distribution play, because they have now an incentive to bring people to that page or those pages. And it required action. It required advertisers to read, which meant that they might comment too. So it was a way to think about integrating businesses that were part of our community in real life into our forum and our kind of town square on the platform. And it was a really cool idea. And when it worked like crazy. On a platform like ours that was very community focused, it was our #1 product. It sold really, really well. It just was awesome. We took, built out a much stronger version of it so that we could make deals with larger media companies, did so with the second largest newspaper chain in the country, started rolling it out. And when it was sold, it worked really well. It was really hard to motivate those salespeople at that level who were selling traditional newspaper ads at that time to switch tack and sell this digital product, which required training. And then it was asking people to actually take action. So, you know, it changed from like a little boutique or a restaurant owner who was already reading our little product, right? To now the newspaper is having a meeting with an auto group which owns 5 dealerships and saying, all right, and now you're going to have to do this thing where you read the newspaper and choose, you know what I mean? And the people in
that part becomes tricky.
Yeah, that sounds like something I have to do now.
Yeah.
So it was, that was a really interesting play called Ad Glue.
Interesting.
Yeah, I went from to working at an agency, but it wasn't a demand side agency. 10 Up, where I last was for the last 5.5 years. 10 Up works with a lot of big publishers, medium-sized publishers as well. And just frankly, brands that have something to say and want to communicate on large scale kind of CMS development projects and supporting those CMSs. It's that was really awesome. So with them, all I was doing is taking a continuation of what I'd always done, but acting a little bit more like a consultant. So I was a revenue strategist, and I work with especially publications on their strategy as they came on board with us. So just trying to figure out where you make money and making sure that we're optimized to make that money. And
Got it.
I only recently joined VentureBeat. It's super exciting. So now that I had the product at VentureBeat, it's something I really couldn't pass up. I've always loved VentureBeat. I read it from day one. Of course, I had a small techie startup at that time when VentureBeat started in 2006. And I mean, being back as a straight up publisher again is awesome. I can have tons of fun and just help this publisher with these goals and build this community. It's really exciting.
Yeah, no, that journey is packed with a lot of learning and a lot of insights, right? So Ben, let's sort of dive into the topic itself, right? Audience ownership and why that is supposed to be the cornerstone in the media industry, right? And we'll sort of we'll try to draw comparisons between 2010 and 2020. Right, back in the day of Sacramento Press, and now how are things at VentureBeat with around the concept of audience ownership or audience development, right? So I know back in the day, Facebook was still not big. It's still not that big a deal for publishers, right? I remember search algorithms were still not getting updated very frequently. Black hat SEO used to be a legend deal, right? I remember there used to be a lot of communities which would throw in insane traffic, like Dig, Stumble Upon. They used to if somebody would make it to the homepage of Dig, right, that would be their moments on the internet. I remember that used to happen. So from point of view of audience ownership, right? Number one, what is your definition of audience ownership? Right? How do you define that?
Sure. It's a really interesting word. Yeah, I'm not even sure if it's the right word. The way I think about it is we need to take unknown audiences and bring them into known communities, right? That's pretty loaded. So think about what I mean by that. First of all, an audience is one-to-many. And we already disposed of that. You mentioned Dig, right? The way that Dig works, the way that Facebook works, the reasons that they work and are engines is because there's an interaction there. So I just want to make sure that I actually think that's kind of the crucial thing that gets lost when we just start talking about the money side of things. What you're looking for is an engaged relationship with somebody, because that's what the web does. We could have had audiences before the web, right? I mean, media existed, right? We had TV, that's audiences. Actually, if you think about it, audience is the part that's undifferentiated. That audience is the place where TV and radio and newspapers and outdoor advertising and like any form of any media gets to play, because it's an audience, they're just listening, right? And then when you think about digital, you now have an opportunity to engage. And so why would you want to engage? You want to build some sort of community. Not every community looks the exact same, but you can build that kind of community. You could build a B2B community around a particular niche. I met a publisher recently who was building out small websites for little niches like indie publishers or digital project managers or software engineers. And I'm in love with that concept because, and maybe it's just my worldview, but because I believe that's where you can differentiate. And it's not just about money. I think that's healthier from day one. Sacramento Press, what we were trying to do. We think there's a conversation that needs to happen, a civil and moderated conversation, but a conversation that needs to happen. And that requires an engaged community, and it's people who trust each other. Okay, so that's one. Put that over here and say, let's get to a community. Now, what's over here where we make money? How do you make money? We have to have this group of people that are known, okay? And I almost wish that wasn't the case. So this is more about AdGlue and its failure. So I thought if we could allow people to basically choose to support a community and support different topics that are going on, that we would have something. Yeah, I remember we weren't the only ones with AdGlue. That was one way about it. David Cohen had Spot.us around the same time. Really cool. If you've never heard of it, it was kind of like a Kickstarter Patreon of that time, where a publication could propose investigative journalism or other initiatives they wanted to go out and fund and ask their communities to fund it. And so you had a lot of this side of it, which was saying, okay, let's turn like a dig type of community thing on its head and have them support. And the other side of that was what Facebook and Google were doing, which is, how can I know the user? If I know the user, if I know something about them, then I can sell ads at higher rates. I felt really uncomfortable with that, and in some ways I still do. But the bottom line is, even if you're ad monetized now, and you're saying, look, I don't need an engaged community, I just need page views. Well, I got news for you. You're gonna need known users on those page views to actually make money. And again, like, this is something I learned the hard way years ago, I think a little bit before everyone else had to, with AdGlue. We've gone down a certain track, and advertisers were already going down a very different track. They wanted to target users based on demographics. So that same auto ownership or group, like, you know what they wanted? They wanted really specific demographics. They could have been wrong. I mean, it would have been even smarter to say, who's going to buy a truck, right? It doesn't matter what your gender is if you're in market for a truck. But back then it was demographics. That's evolved now, but you know, basically what's happening is you have third-party data that's saying so-and-so is in market for a truck. And then you can go out and target that person. And if you're a big publisher, you already know this, okay? Where the game is shifting is cookies on the advertising side. So if you rely on a big third-party DMP, Crux, Load-Me, whatever it is, and that DMP is really stuck on cookies to identify who it is that's visiting your website, you're already lost on you're already lost on Firefox. It's not going to store those types of cookies, at least for most users, right? You're done on Safari
already.
Devices, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you still have Chrome for now. I think Chrome has a date in 2022. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Early 2022?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like by 2022. So you'll be done everywhere, and there's an actual expiration date on that. Okay, so keep that in mind. So that the way that things have gone for the last 8 years, let's say, that business model of how to know somebody reliant on third-party cookies, sunsetting, if it's not really effectively over already. So then what is going to replace it? Well, one of the key things that's going to replace it is someone logs in, right? They're authenticated. And then you own some of the first-party data. Now, here's where things get good if you're relying on advertising. If you're not relying on third-party and you can get the behavior of a login, that person's not only much more valuable because the data is much more valuable, it's better quality data, but you don't have to pay for it. You own that data. And I think that's where the owned audience thing comes from, frankly. But I would say, I'm not trying to own an audience. I'm trying to have a known community. And these days, knowing that community requires, because of the way that things are going technically, for me to own a direct relationship with that community member. So that's really, I hope that helps nuance. That's the ad side. So that's where, like,
absolutely.
You get a better product, you get better community, this is better for everybody, and also you're going to be able to monetize it better. Now, that's only the ad side. And if that were all it was, that should be enough. But most publishers are also very interested in reader revenue initiatives. And I just say, widen your idea of what reader revenue can be. When you have a logged in user, now you have the opportunity to nudge and shape and personalize to a very different degree than you did just thinking about that person as anonymous traffic. So it may be that like a paywall is not appropriate for you. Okay, if the whole web was behind paywalls, it would not be a very fun place. But you might have a white paper from a partner, and every download you get paid. Well, when you have a logged in user, it's a lot easier for that person to download the white paper, right? Like, you already know their email, you can pre-fill it. If they've
Yeah.
downloaded a white paper before, you have their company name, their job title. Maybe they could just press a button and download
Yes.
it and give
Yes.
consent to a third party to send them an email to follow up on the quality of the white paper, right? And that's all that partner is looking for. And the multiples are insane. I did some kind of like calculation on this, like how
Mm-hmm.
much is a person worth? How much is somebody who I don't know worth versus someone who's just known, just the ad part, versus somebody who takes an action like downloading a white paper, versus somebody who signs up for an event or a webinar,
Right.
buys a ticket. And every time you just jump up in value. That
Yeah.
person who's anonymous is fractions of a cent. And that person who downloads a white paper might be $30. And that person who downloads 3 white papers because you made it really easy, that's now $90, right? They're talking, like, we're not talking about linear growth. We're talking
Yeah.
about
Exponential growth.
growth. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if that makes sense, that's the power of what we're trying to achieve. Now, of
Right.
course, all these publishers, VentureBeat included, we're just trying to get off the mat, right? We're just trying to join this game.
Right. You know what? I love how you sort of packaged, how you attached a dollar value to those various stages of the user. When somebody's anonymous, they're sort of worth a couple of cents here and there, right? Or probably a dollar at best, right? As you being, you're selling, some fancy drug, right? But the moment you know them, the moment they know you, the moment it's a relationship, the value of that relationship sort of increases exponentially as the engagement increases exponentially, right? Very, very interesting sort of packaging, right? It just simplifies the understanding, the concept, and makes it so much more digestible as well, right? So now help me understand this, Ben. Back in the day, right? Audience development. Now, I remember, right? Pretty much nobody in 2010, right? Not TechCrunch, not VentureBeats, not GigaOM, RIP GigaOM, of course, but nobody had login as a concept, right? AOL had login, Yahoo had login, but again, we're talking about giants right now. But the publishers who were part of Lion, as we were speaking earlier, right? They would not have logins or asking for email IDs.
The neat thing about Lion, this is what's so cool about coming up in, it's hard scrabble, right? I should start with say, first, Lion is local online independent publishers. So these were local independent online news publishers who, we were one of them, Sacramento Press, but it's an actual group. Look it up, Google it, Lion Publishers. It's a strong group that not only still exists today. I actually went to their conference this year. It was sort of by chance. Tenna, my former company, had a contract to work with Lion and Google around improving the ecosystem. It was really awesome, actually. So went to the conference, and I was thinking, I've been to these. I've been to these. I was one of the founding members. I know what this is like. Nope. It was 10 times bigger. And of the people that kind of were my peers, I'd say about 70% were still doing what they were doing, which is amazing.
Incredible. Yeah.
On top of that, there were so many more new people and so many more new ways to engage your community. So I actually think that group of people, if you just go to the website and you just see it and go, yeah, it doesn't look really pretty, or it doesn't look like it's super engaging. Very different when you actually go to the town. That's what hyperlocal is really cool about. So these folks are engaging with people literally every day. I'll give you a really good example of the proto kind of this evolution. Was there was a woman in West Seattle, which is it's basically like a little island west of Seattle, connected by a bridge. And so it's a very tight-knit, smaller community. And there's a woman who covered that community soup to nuts as a very traditional reporter blogger. Like, it's not like if you went to her site, you'd think this is super engaging. But if you talk to her, or if you went to West Seattle, she was literally sitting in the coffee shop, okay? She was having the civil conversations as a human being. When something happened, people called her immediately before they called the police, before they called the fire department. She was their 311, if you will. She was such a hub of what was going on in that community. She was extremely engaged. So it's funny because the tools that we had at the time, you know, just having a WordPress site in 2009 or something, that was a mismatch. It didn't have the kind of like engagement pieces that we have now. And yet, did she know her audience? Absolutely. And when people bought advertising from her, they didn't need data outside of what they saw with their eyes of her in the coffee shop and her responsiveness and all that. So I always find that a little bit funny because these communities always kind of worked on multiple levels, and it was hard to see if you were doing like an academic research project and just visiting websites and saying, are these people engaged? Are they logged in? All that stuff. As we are talking about kind of scaled publishers and publishers who are not so hyperlocal and it's not so obvious, yeah, those probably are logins. But I wanted to pause for a second and say, it's amazing to me how influential, truly amazing, groundbreaking that group of publishers has been and will continue to be. And so, you know, it's a little bit of a niche group, but it's a niche group that has from the beginning been out ahead and in really interesting ways, especially around community, where user-generated content was never crass. It was never, how many pages can we get if somebody uploads a cat video? Like that was not what that kind of level of engagement ever was. Community comment moderation, another quick example. I remember back when we started Sacramento Press, we didn't think about it as logged in users necessarily, but we wanted people who were engaged, which meant that you had to like enter in some information about yourself. And we decided that if you were going to be a commenter, you had to give us your phone number. And the reason was I would call you and say, hey, you know, you wrote this comment and it's actually got a point. I like it, but you called somebody a name and we just don't allow name calling. It's in our terms of service. And I have to take down your comment. So I have for now, but I'd like to put it back up if you let me modify it and take that out and have an actual conversation with the person about that. And 95% of the time, that's what was necessary. It was actually that level of intervention. It's always been a challenge in my head. How does that scale? How do you take it right before it becomes an unhealthy conversation that devolves into just name calling and redirect it into a conversation where people are talking about different approaches to an interesting, complicated, multifaceted issue? Like that's the key. No one's super unlocked that. And so I still rely on the wisdom of what's going on in these kind of hyper-local communities to understand how you do that.
Right. No, so yes, okay. So while, you know, there were different sort of ways to identify or know people, right? The world we live in today, obviously it's way more sophisticated. It's way more easier, if I may say, right? Login is a normal now. Right? Everybody wants you to everybody expects you to sort of sign up and so on and so forth. Right? And then there is a promise of some value which will get unlocked if you sign up or if you sign in and stuff like that, right? That transition, right? Making the user or delivering that promise is what sort of helps you convert those anonymous users to at least a known set of people, right? What do you think has sort of changed in that journey, right? How the publishers enabled that, or how should they be actually enabling that? Because people, it is very easy to sort of put something beyond, put something behind a paywall, right? That's the easiest thing probably, right? But to sort of genuinely create a hook and then to sort of get them to make a commitment that, okay, I'm going to click on sign up button, I'm going to fill in 3 fields, and then sort of go and read and then actively engage. Right? That's really hard, right? It's
yes, it is. No, absolutely. Well, it is if you start with the cover bare, right? I've actually found this interesting. I remember there was a moment when I'm working at 10up, and so I'm working with dozens of publishers at a time. And I'm looking at everybody's different revenue situations. And actually, one of the funniest things is that when you work as a consultant, I didn't know that the number one question from everybody is, what's everybody else doing? So I remember when everyone was asking the question, what's everybody else doing? And the answer started to be, well, they're really working on reader revenue initiatives. They really want logins. People want to go from unknown to known. And it's been fairly recent. I'm thinking that was maybe 2 years ago, something like that. It was actually kind of shockingly recent. And I always thought that people were kind of going backwards into it. So let me explain. Back in the day with Sacramento Press, you could probably find me on stage railing against paywalls. They're never going to work. It's already been proven. The New York Times tried it. It failed. Unless you bring someone something that literally makes the money, like the Wall Street Journal, you have to have in your job to make money, and it'll probably be paid for by your corporation. These initiatives just will fail, and we'll be back to square one. Not to mention, not only will paywalls fail, they should fail, because everything should, the sort of information wants to be free was in the back of my head, okay? Because my background's in economics, and I kept thinking but the marginal cost of delivering that content is 0. So to another person. So why should that possibly have a cost to it? Metering it, you read 3 articles and your 4th one's, well, why would it be? Because it doesn't cost anything. So in a free market where that's readily available information, that cannot possibly be worth money. Unless, and this is interesting too, unless it's a tribal affiliation, similar to the dualism I was trying to break down. So on a philosophical level, this bothered me, because I'm the only reason you might do it is if you trusted or liked that media news source. And the reason that you might trust or like that media news source is basically that you would like everyone else to know that you trust or read that media news source. So it's not so much that I love the New Yorker is why I sign up for the New Yorker. It's because I want everyone else to know that I'm a New Yorker person and I've read that article, right? And that's really more about me. It's about borrowing the media brand so that I can feel like a part of an in-group, which definitely means there's sort of an out group, and it means that we're not having that robust civil conversation that the internet had promised, right? All the things. Anyway, I get sort of heated about the philosophical pieces, but you can find me sort of having that argument 10 years ago. And things totally changed. And I was absolutely wrong. First of all, I was wrong about data. I was wrong. Facebook won. Absolutely, no question. And little AdBlue lost. The second thing I was definitely wrong about, paywalls, registration. I was absolutely wrong about that. It kind of goes hand in hand. We went from a place where the revolution that I understood in the 2000s was about the ascendancy of software and the ascendancy of a network and software, internet, web apps. That's what it was. And it was really exciting. And seeing those companies grow to fruition is still, I think it's great. It's awesome. But the last decade has actually been about big data and AI. Those are the two that go together. It's the specific kind of software that takes advantage of that big data in order to make predictions. And so I hope I'm not being too philosophical, but I was still in the 2000s. I was talking about in 2010. Yeah. And now have the hindsight to see wow, this really changed. So anyway, your question was, first of all, why did it change? What enabled this? Yeah, actually, a lot of things like OAuth, just the ease of logging in with your fingerprint, or with a login to Google or Facebook that they're sharing, having those mega platforms basically lighting their tent so other people can get logins. that has absolutely changed. I mean, DMPs themselves used to be very, 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 very expensive tools. And now you really can build your own on a cloud system for not a whole lot of money. It may not work. I don't want to undercut their business models. It may not be easy to broker your data and sell it to third parties or things like that, but you could leverage your data. So like that's an interesting thing. The other thing that's changed a lot is, so when I was thinking about it, I kept thinking about the information is sort of free. The content is sort of like, you know, that's all out there. And that all there was this sort of affiliation. I think that's sort of I think it's a little bit of a fake thing. Like, maybe there's another way to think about this where the cupboard is not so bare. Because that's a sad way of thinking about publications. It basically means everything you do is valueless and needs to be given away for free, right? That's kind of a sad little hole I was in, and maybe I was just feeling sad for myself because the media business is hard. But just because just because it's hard actually doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. You should probably run towards it and try to solve that. And what I think has matured is the conversations that have been happening around what value do we provide? And it was exactly what you said. It was like, there was a moment when people went, oh yeah, this isn't gating our content. That isn't what we've got to find a way to say there's something beyond the gate, and the gate is super easy. It's so easy to just put your thumb on the pad and it charges you and you're a subscriber now. So like that became really easy. Now that that's easy, that bar has lowered so significantly. What can we give you? And the Times is a perfect example. So their first paywall initiative did not work. Their second one famously ridiculed, oh, it's leaky and it doesn't make any sense and all this stuff. And it actually worked. And then they did a lot of science around sort of why it worked to pump it up and make it work better. And one of the things that made it work so much better that I always think about is if they showed a variety of different coverage to that same user, much, much, much more likely to actually become a subscriber. So if I saw 10 articles this week and they were all politics, I was actually less likely to subscribe than if 3 of those were about arts and 3 of those were from a magazine site and 2 of those were recipes. Because now I'm starting to see this really differentiated niche content, this community. I'm starting to feel out the shape of an organization that matches me and makes me feel better as a supporter and a member of the community. So it becomes a little bit less about that thought I had about kind of, well, I'm just using their brand. I'm deciding that I'm telling everybody I'm a New York Times person. And there's still a lot of that. But I think that there's a question around value. What value, actual value, can your organization provide? Now at VentureBeat, it's actually like super clear. I came to VentureBeat partially because it could not be more crystal clear at VentureBeat. VentureBeat made a decision a few years ago to focus on today's revolution. So if you, all the things, the TechCrunch, the GigaOms, and the R's, and all the things that similar kind of independent ones, if you think about them, they're either they're done or they got bought by somebody big. And a lot of them shifted a little bit more towards lifestyle. And it's all because these are different days. This is not the day of software and internet. This is the day of big data and AI. And so actually, I commend Matt Marshall, who's the owner founder of VentureBeat, who came from a newspaper background, writing about venture capital, to found this thing. And Matt knew that we'd entered this age as well. So focused us on AI technologies. That's not going to be the last revolution, but it was great to know that I'm part of it. We're going to now focus on this thing. We're not going to cover as many of the so-and-so got $10 million in their Series B. You know, this is now our focus to like what's impactful. Now, when you do that, and that has had a great result. We are now #1 in terms of reach in AI coverage. And that's our editorial group worked really, really hard on. So I think it's awesome. What does that mean? What value is that bringing? It really makes us much more of a B2B powerhouse, where we're putting on large conferences, we're putting on small scale roundtables, very intimate, These are high value moments. You can be in the room with business decision makers who are buying AI and cloud technologies, right? That's what our partners want to support. They want to support the building up this revolution. They want to support us in our job to make sure everyone's not just informed, but engaged and adopting all the tools they're going to need to take the next steps for their businesses. So that's a very powerful value center. That's it excited me from before day one. That's why like I took the phone call and wanted to have the conversation, because here's an organization that has a value center to it that's already known. And now what we need to do, it's not really about like gaining content. What it's about doing is moving people along the value chain so that at every point we can excite them and delight them with, oh my gosh, now you can join a Slack channel and have a conversation, ask a question, and build those types of communities that, you know, I'm super passionate about. So that was like that. I mean, I could probably go on forever about this, but that's where my passion is. You can see it. That's where my passion is today. I think we can marry so many of the things, hard-fought lessons from the hyper-local space, from my early days, from understanding what the web was 10, 15 years ago, but also think about how easy it is now to just have somebody cross that tiny digital threshold. It's just a tiny threshold, because on our side, there's a massive amount of value on the other side of that threshold. We can give so much more than just an article that was written with some thought to SEO. Like that isn't the value of this organization. It doesn't even scratch the surface of what the people here do. The journalists, the technologists, the people who are running, everybody here, amazing people. We have so much to give to our community. Anyway, it's mind-blowing to me. And all we need to do now, it sounds simple actually when I say it, we just need to get a lot of people to cross that tiny digital threshold.
That barrier, Now, this becomes a very interesting conversation, right? Simply because now this organization, this new media organization has two sets of customers. Right? One are readers who they're trying to, nudge and get them over, that barrier, and convert them into loyal audience, so that they come back, read more, commit more, engage more, and so on and so forth, right? And then hopefully at some point in time also start paying for this content and this value, right? And then there's the conventional relationship with the advertiser, which is now changing, because you're not selling page views or impressions or eyeballs or views on the video, but you're selling, hey, I have super qualified, highly interested, highly engaged, highly relevant people who potentially have a lot of interest in your products. So I'm not going to expose a 720 by 90 ad of yours to them, but I'm going to put you into a webinar with them, right? So you have two customers suddenly, right? And like the earlier years when media only had one customer, which was the guy who paid, right?
Maybe that's a funny thing too. I mean, how many back in the quote good old days where corporate media was dumping newspapers even though you canceled your subscription, where you're taking your magazines and sending them to every executive in town that you could find in your blue book of executives for free. Okay, so it's always funny to me. And of course you have broadcast media that did not want to be picky. So there was always like a hidden free component to a lot of these things. And there was a savviness. If you really talk to those top executives at the time about what that meant, they had like dual priorities at the time too. They did have people they wanted to be subscribers who were very intentional. And there was data behind that. If you're a magazine, you wanted to use a lot of the subscription data to show who your audience was, even back then. And on the other hand, you were trying to get a lot of distribution. And that's just kind of how it was. So in a weird way, like I worked with this PR team back at Sacramento Press, and they really shaped me, really wonderful. And one of the things that they said was, Ben, pick any media revolution. It doesn't matter. It could be radio, could be broadcast TV, could be, newspapers, cable TV, pamphlets, and read the history of that. You will find that it is the same. It doesn't matter which one you pick. And I did. I actually chose cable TV. I was kind of like, yeah, how did cable TV come to happen? So I read a bunch of books in cable TV history, and it was fascinating. And in the early days, man, cable TV sounded a whole lot like this little hyper-local thing I was starting up in Sacramento. I couldn't even understand why this awesome PR agency wanted to work with us. We just were such small fries, and like one of their principals helped relaunch Apple under Steve Jobs. So it's like, wow, I don't know, there's something like so cool just about working with them. And then once I read that history, I totally got it. They were just placing a bet. They just thought this may be the next big media revolution. And they all start in this really weird, tiny, tiny way. So, in some ways I think, of course we're different. Of course it's new. And also it's extremely the same. And you really can talk to people who are in all these different media industries, and the deeper you go and the more maybe it's having a couple whiskeys with them. It just, if you get to the stories, how they came up, and I worked at so-and-so place, and you will find they have really sophisticated understandings of the people that they call their audience. The longer they've been in that, the deeper they've been in that. The institutional knowledge actually is like really cool, and it's kind of there. We sometimes forget about it and lose track because we think that digital is more different than it actually is. And we think that we're not very good at it. But if you dig deep enough, look, I got another example. This is so funny to me. At 10up, as I was there, the number of publishers we worked with stayed about the same, but we kept growing and growing and growing in terms of the number of big brands. And those generally weren't my account. I'd work with brands as well, but mostly I was working with publishers. And the brands were looking to tell stories. They wanted to write content and have a really sophisticated setup on WordPress so that content could be syndicated, could be distributed. Well, why would they do that? Because it's a great marketing tool, because they get to tell this story, not because they want readers. Do you think that Uber ever came to 10up and said, we really have to support a large number of readers on Uber? Think about that.
Yeah,
and
doesn't
yet,
make sense. Yes.
An enormous amount of content that required a super sophisticated CMS to run, as sophisticated or maybe more than what we were setting up for large magazine networks or, radio syndication networks, like all these amazing, complicated things. And yet Uber had this incredibly sophisticated CMS. And you're thinking, well, why? They don't even care about readers. Well, it's simple. They care about riders. They care about drivers. That's how they saw their world. They saw their world only in the converted folks, only the known people, only the people that were part of their community, which in their case, they have a community, but it's a marketplace. Okay.
Yeah.
So think about it this way, how many brands out there are two-sided marketplaces, hungry to tell their stories? But to them, it's marketing. To them, it's just the part that gets you in the door with their concept, their brand, but not just in a way that you see their brand like an old banner ad, in a way that you're actually becoming engaged. You're reading about it. Maybe you're taking a poll. They're walking you down a very sophisticated path. Interestingly, it's a path that all of us in the media industry pioneered and built. We just weren't taking it to completion. And we were focusing way too much on what we would consider now the top of the funnel, and way too little on the people who are actually our big supporters and our biggest fans.
I love that example, right? The fact that, it's not really a media thing, but it's just really about a brand, right? If as a brand, you are not focusing on truly understanding and knowing your audience, right? What exactly are you doing after all? Right? Ben,
none of these brands, none of them, No one at Johnson & Johnson is like, wow, you wouldn't believe the readers we have. It's just operates. And yet they're doing the same, like they're actually using the same tools. And this is a weird, sad thing if you think about it, but everyone's like, well, I remember thinking this, okay, so all these journalists are out of work. Like, we keep cutting journalists. It's
all the time.
kills me all the time. Like, this become my side. The easiest way to explain my passion as somebody who's not in the media industry is I just say, like, I'm really focused right now on saving journalist jobs. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm losing that battle every day. Okay, it's still worth it. But I'm just saying that, where are those people? Like, where are these people going? Because for years, of course, not right now, but for years, we kept having fewer journalists, but also lower unemployment rates. I'm not saying that journalists are such a huge part of the economy that move in, but I am saying, like, there's this kind of like, oh, but it's not like people, even the people I knew weren't necessarily unemployed. They were PR. I mean, many are PR.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean? Doing the same function for a brand that doesn't care about it for a reader, right? Those brands are caring about it for a conversion.
Yeah.
And then I noticed, and this is a good thing, the last couple of years, that a lot of media companies started to think in a healthy way, the same way. So that's when there was kind of a shift, I think, in a good way, to saying, yeah, you know, there does have to be some sort of conversion event here, because we are not in the business of collecting readers anymore. And that is a very healthy decision to make. Even though 10 years ago, this same person would have said the opposite.
This has been an amazing conversation, Ben. Thank you so much for taking the time. We're almost out of time right now. I don't want to sort of hold it right now, but lovely stories, lovely examples, lovely anecdotes. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.